Hi, sweet souls. This is Krista Xiomara, your podcast host of I'm Awake Now What podcast. We are doing week 3 of our summer series where we are talking about releasing religion, inner healing, and coming home to yourself. I have actually ran into a couple of technical issues, so I'm having to record this audio through Zoom and my audio in my own laptop. So the audio won't be as crisp this week, so I apologize for that issue. But the show must go on, and I'm here wanting to get this information out to you and provide you guys with additional support and keep this free 1-hour course going every week. So it is what it is. You just roll with the punches. So just another reminder, I'm going to go over the weekly course schedule every week just to touch base with you so you know what we're covering. We've already touched on religious trauma and wounding, doubt, and walking away. This week we're talking about embracing uncertainty. Next week we're going to talk about inner healing. Week 5 we're going to be discussing awakening. Week 6 we're going to be talking about finding your truth. Week 7 building support systems, and week 8 coming home to yourself. So as I always start every one of these summer series episodes out with just a quick introduction of like, what are we actually doing here? What's the intention and the purpose and the mission and vision of this 8-week series? The purpose and intention is to provide a safe space for individuals to explore, create, and release belief systems. And the mission and vision that I've created for this 8-week summer series is to usher in a global expansion of our communities through open dialogue, spirituality, reflection, inner healing, and self-love. And a quick disclaimer for all individuals engaging in and are participating in any portion of this course are encouraged to seek professional help and any other supplemental mental health assistance they might require. The topics covered in this course are sensitive, and there is a possibility of becoming triggered. I'm Awake Now What podcast is not responsible for any trauma incurred while completing this course. Mental health resources will be provided after each weekly course and available on all platforms wherever this course is distributed. Okay, so what to expect every week. I am touching on specific topics. We're having this conversation. It's one way. I'm just talking to you about my experience, my story, giving you advice and wisdom about how to get through the process of leaving your religion of origin. I'm giving you weekly reflections and prompts, some reading recommendations, corresponding podcast episodes, additional resources, and then just remember that you can always DM me at I'm Awake Now What podcast on Instagram, or you can email me directly to talk to me about your experience doing this 8-week course at ianwpodcast@gmail.com. I love hearing from you guys. I love hearing your questions. Maybe at the end of each course, as we start getting to get people's information and emails in, I'll start sharing them with you. Right now, I'm pre-recording these in anticipation, but there will be an overlap where it will be happening in live week-to-week time. But I wanted to get a head start because I knew how much production work this was going to take. So I'm about a 3-week jump ahead in getting into the episode. So as soon as these start airing, hopefully we'll get some feedback and I'll be able to share that with you guys. So week 3, embracing uncertainty. So we're going to talk all about what this actually means. And I did want to start off with I'm going to continue to put some inspiring quotes, but I did want to remind everybody that the intention of why this podcast was incepted was to help anybody on the spiritual journey and personal development. And I'm Awake Now What has become a safe haven for people from all backgrounds, religious upbringings, and spiritual communities. And so this is a place for you to explore your own belief systems, to let go of them. This is a place of tolerance and acceptance and support. So I want you to feel safe to be here with me and safe to be exactly who you are. As we get through this week's episode, find a quiet space where you can listen and interact at your own pace. pause this podcast, um, this a presentation as necessary. Take your time. Obviously, every week I am throwing you guys a ton of information, so please just take your time through it. There's no rush. I'm asking you questions usually through every point as well, so you want to be able to take time and write and journal and do whatever is for you. I've curated two quotes this week that are in the vein of what we'll be discussing. The first one is this really beautiful one by Gilda Radner, and it says, "I wanted a perfect ending. Now I've learned the hard way that some poems do not rhyme and some stories do not have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Life is about not knowing, having to change, taking in the moment, and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen. Delicious ambiguity." And that delicious ambiguity is what we're really going to be biting into this week. So I'll just say that for now because we've got so much to talk about. And this next quote is by Glennon Doyle. I'll probably be quoting her and Elizabeth Gilbert and Brene Brown a lot during these 8 weeks because they've been like my spiritual teachers. Glennon Doyle just came out with a really beautiful book called Untamed. I wish I had this book at the beginning of my spiritual journey because it really would have helped me find my footing a lot clearer. So I highly recommend, it's on the list this week of things to read, and I highly recommend getting that book in the process of doing this as well. Not only is Glennon such a prolific writer, but she's also incredibly articulate, and she puts into pen to paper what we all experience in such a beautiful and eloquent way, and sort of holds up this really beautiful mirror for us and our experiences. So please definitely go get her book. This quote is, "Every time you're given a choice between disappointing someone else and disappointing yourself, your duty is to disappoint that someone else. Your job throughout your entire life is to disappoint as many people as it takes to avoid disappointing yourself." So I'm just going to say that, and you'll see why these two quotes are part of this week's episode. This week we're talking about embracing uncertainty. Woven into the process of leaving one's religion of origin, we undergo a great deal of change, and it usually happens rapidly. And as humans, we're meant to grow and evolve. And even if our religious teachings tell us otherwise, as for instance, I was told that evolution wasn't a thing. And honestly, naively, when I grew up, I thought I was Adam and Eve's like great grandchild. I say that in one of the podcast episodes because that's how it was taught to me. And some people in religious experiences understand that what the Bible is saying, it can either be taken figuratively or literally. I took it very literally because that was how it was being cascaded to me. One thing that is important when you go on this journey is that if your experience is anything like me, you've been solidified in this little box. And the quotes that we did last week really got to the heart of, like, if you created your form and your identity, now you're disrupting everything and you're breaking the mold of your form, and you're realizing you have to start from the bottom up and create a whole new foundation of who you are. And there's a lot of uncertainty in that, and the evolution and the changing. There's just so much that happens when you decide to go on this journey of exploration and self-discovery, and especially going away from your religion of origin. It's theorized that our entire body regenerates every 7 years, creating new cells after the process of, our regular cells die off due to normal wear and tear of being human. So we're changing even if we don't think we are, and it's happening daily. If you took a loofah to your arm today, you would be scrubbing off dead skin cells that were going to fall off anyways. Our body is such a beautiful machine that is doing so much for us all the time. And this change, the reason I'm calling specifically out this change is that it can be amplified if we go on this journey towards awakening and understanding about what you believe, who you are, and how you fit into the larger narrative of life and the cosmos. Inevitably, change greets you every morning as you start to question everything. And last week we talked about questioning and doubt. So as you're questioning and doubting, then change has to happen because those belief systems no longer meet with your current intelligence, and something has to change. You have to find a new belief. You have to find a new standard way of being, a new foundation to stand on. So I know for myself, I felt really triggered by certain words when I left my religious experience. And having studied so many religions and ideologies, I came to understand that language can be very deliberate. And certain words are chosen during certain times in our history to depict with precision what one must feel, imagine, and in just hearing a word. And because of that, I've become increasingly sensitive in recycling any religious words that may trigger you on your new path. And in embracing uncertainty, you are welcoming in ambiguity and an unfounded belief that everything will work out. Like you don't know yet, but you're going on a hunch, right? And that everything's going to be okay on this journey. And in the context of the religious experience, some people might refer to this as faith. And so I want to just really be mindful of using religious terms that might trigger anybody in this process. So I want to encourage you that you can reference that as what we're talking about, but it's not the same thing for you. And you have to find out what word you can call this new path that you're on. And I encourage you to find a new word that helps you embrace uncertainty and that blissful, beautiful, delicious ambiguity, so that you're put at ease with that word and that it sits in your heart easily. So this next slide is, I want to talk about fear and confronting it. And I ask here why embracing uncertainty can save your life after you've left your origin. I say this because it's so true. When I grew up Catholic, I was guaranteed a really high level of certainty in every facet of my life. I was promised security, I was promised protection, family, partnership, and I was even promised life after death in heaven as long as I practiced and believed what I was told with blind and unquestioning faith. And most of what I was told by way of my faith was indoctrination. And so in leaving the church, I was essentially like quote unquote, left out in the cold with no certainty at all. And this was really scary. And you might be feeling really scared about this or feeling like, I don't know what's next for me. That is so real and true and valid. And because I hadn't begun to think for myself or had any solid ideas about what I did believe about myself or my news story or God or anything else, I remember feeling this immense, deep fear related to, what was next. Because if I went, I basically went to my family and I said, I don't believe any of this at all. And, their first question was, well, what do you believe? And I didn't have an answer at the time. I just knew that my being in this religious experience was hurting me as a person, and that I couldn't go on in the facade of this. So what I want to talk about in relationship to confronting the fears that might be coming up with you, um, some of the fears that came up was just the fear of the unknown and not knowing what's going to happen next, and um, just like the visceral fear, and then there was like the emotional fear, there was like the physical fear, like how am I going to support myself if I decide to leave my religion of origin and my family and all of those things. And so the thing I want to say about confronting your fears is that I would highly encourage you to first feel everything that you're feeling in that moment. The fear that you're feeling of being scared to leave your religion of origin, and to know that fear is something new and different, and it's real and it's valid. For me, my fear began to rise within me, and the fear of the unknown used to terrify me. It doesn't now. I feel so much more peace and relief knowing that I don't know, and I feel so much more held in that, the uncertainty, the certainty of the uncertainty. Um, and I don't know if you'll get there at some point, but I can say for me, I feel like I'm in such a better place now, just allowing life to work its way through me, not fearing death, not fearing what happens after death, and liberating myself in such a way that I can not focus on my death any longer and focus on my life. Because in Catholicism, that was a prime circular thought that kept going. Like at any moment, if I died, was my soul in a place where it could be taken to heaven, and spent an inordinate amount of time stewing about whether I was going to, if I died, would I be okay? And now I know I'm going to be okay. And I have a different understanding of what happens to us after we die, but that might have to be a whole different podcast episode. I don't want to get you mixed up in that conversation right now, but I'm in such a better place now. But in the beginning, it was really scary because that was what was, the most terrifying part, was just feeling like, what was going to happen to me, and then what was next for me. So what I want to say for that, what I also want to say is that that fear also, the fear of the unknown terrifying me, I found a way to push through that fear at some point, and tethered myself to my own inner wisdom, that I had to find out for myself what was true for me, what I believed in. If I wasn't being forced to believe something, like that was really critical to me. And I even went atheist for a little bit, because I was like, I don't even know if I believe in a God, because I've just been told that there is a God, and he's this like gray-haired guy that's just sitting up in heaven, like super disappointed in everybody. So I had to un like literally take out of my mind every single thing, and like look at it piece by piece, and look at whether it was ringing true for me or not. And the biggest thing, the fear that kept me stuck was, like I said, the fear of the soul and damnation. And then I used to feel scared that I was like a bad person, because my whole life I was told, like, if you leave the Catholic Church, or if you get divorced, if you do X, Y, and Z, like you're a bad person. And so having that indoctrinated into you for your entire life, and then going and leaving the church and making these decisions that required you to live out of alignment from essentially what you were taught, made you really feel like you were possibly a bad person. And so I had to really overcome trying my hardest not to feel bad. And I will say that a lot of that was done in therapy. So I definitely encourage you, like, if you have the means and the resources to have somebody work on those really deep, heavy conditioned things that exist inside you, that tell you that you're a bad person because of the religious experience you had. And then the subsequent feelings, like the layering on of that badness that sits inside of you because you've left. And I also feared that I was going in the wrong direction. I never gave up on my pursuit, but I definitely was fearful that I was potentially going in the wrong direction. And then there was the fear that I was giving up a good life for a bad one. Again, like, we'll talk a little bit more about this dichotomy, but religion just deals in the dichotomy. It's black and white, and there is no in between. And so it was like, I was leaving a long-term relationship. I was leaving the security of my church. I subsequently was losing the security of my family and their support. And there were many times where I was wondering, was I going to be essentially marooned in this other life because I had chosen to take a sidestep out of this other life that no longer resonated with me. In doing that, it was scary. It's true. And you don't know at the time. You don't know if it's going to get better. You don't know if you're going to come out the other side. And it wasn't easy. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything at this point. But what I do know is that in coming home to myself, which we'll talk about at the end of this whole series, is that I did go in the right direction. And even though I made mistakes on the way, and definitely people were hurt 100%, including myself, it was the right decision so that I could get in alignment with myself and I could get to a place where I was acting from a high level of integrity and personal empowerment. So I just want you to, right now, maybe if you take a break, think about what are some fears that are coming up for you, and write what are these fears grounded in? How real are these fears? Are they tangible or intangible? Like, can you not escape your religious experience? Because that's a legitimate fear. Or is there a perceived fear of disappointing your family? And that's a real fear, but it's something you can overcome with time and support and all of those things, but it's not a physical barrier to get you out, right? So that's kind of how I want to draw the distinction between those two things. And then asking yourself, once you've listed these fears and the tangibleness of them all, is how can you creatively maneuver overcoming these fears? Like, what's something you can do today to help ease the fear in your mind, create creative solutions and steps and actions behind them to overcome them? So I will say, for me, what ended up happening is originally my family had such a hard time with my decision that they chose to just not have a relationship with me for a while. And years afterwards, and even till now, there's still this back and forth. And where I've landed as a human being is that it's not always safe for me to be in relationship with them, and that's okay. And so you have to, once you get a stronger footing, you have to figure out, how do you interact with these people in your past or in your present, sometimes, maybe depending on what the situation is. But how do you, once you've gotten over that fear and you've made your decision, you've walked away, you've taken your actions, you're moving into a healthier space, and you kind of don't want to get pulled back into wherever they are with the situation, because most likely their healing is not happening at the same time as yours. And so sometimes you have to create space, you have to protect yourself, and self-preservation is really good. It's a really great practice to create boundaries. So in that creative maneuvering of overcoming those fears, you might have to do some things like that. Just want to put that in the forefront of your mind. Okay, so embracing uncertainty, figuring out what is next for you. Like, what I want to say about this is that you're figuring it out what's next for you, like in real time, and that you have to give yourself space to ask for what you need, invite the healing in, and create a safe space for you to recover from any trauma and wounding you have incurred, and then to work towards putting yourself back together in one piece. I often use this extended metaphor to describe what happens to all of us, to most of us, whether we grew up in in religious families or not. There's this idea that we come into the world, into our family, as a puzzle, and our family looks at the puzzle and puts it in the order that they think is best, and sometimes they put the puzzle pieces to match their own puzzle pieces. And as we grow into our adulthood, we start to realize that those same puzzle pieces are out of order. Maybe one's sticking out and it's uncomfortable. Maybe someone left a few pieces off. Maybe somebody put some pieces on that actually don't belong to your puzzle. And when we grow up and we start to go down this path of questioning and spiritual development and personal development and growth, and we take the route of introspection, we start to remove and rearrange those puzzle pieces, right? And we have to put them in an order that fits and feels true and authentic to us. And so when you leave your religion of origin, it's a big puzzle piece in the whole puzzle that makes up you. And you have to decide if that puzzle piece stays or it goes. Does it match with your puzzle or does it not? And then you have to reconfigure all your puzzle pieces until you are returned to your birthright of fullness and wholeness. And doing this will become a daily practice, and you will be figuring it out in real time. And you also have to create habits and practices that keep you nourished. And I would encourage you to also try to find happiness in the uncertainty, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple more slides, but just remembering that, like, you're figuring it out, like what is next for you, can be daunting sometimes. You know, take it day by day, bit by bit, and don't get too overwhelmed with having to change everything or question everything all at once. Take it as slow as you need to, because this is definitely hard work. It's not easy to leave an indoctrinated lifestyle and come back to yourself in a way that is loving and authentic and compassionate and kind. So I wanted to talk about self-education, which is like so important. It was really, really important on my pathway as well. So there's a couple bullet points here. So we have unlearning, learning what you want, need, desire, and what is right for you, reading and watching documentaries, liberating yourself, and curiosity as a daily practice, learning to think for yourself and using curiosity as like your guiding light. So what I want to say is, like, for one, try your hardest to embrace the imperfections of life in yourself. Like, a lot of people that have come to the podcast, and even myself, growing up in religious experiences, holiness equates to perfection, right? And that we're always working towards having perfection with divinity and with God. And so a lot of us come out of this religious experience wanting to be perfect and feeling ashamed when we aren't, or when we make mistakes and things like that. So even unlearning this idea of perfection and embracing imperfection, which is what makes this society so beautiful, because we're all different versions of one being, and we're not perfect, and we make mistakes. And that's really critical to unlearn that. But speaking specifically about unlearning, it is one of the hardest things to do. And again, like, if you've been in a religion that is like hyper indoctrination, you spent the bulk of your free time in your religious community, at camp, all of your friends were that same religion, you know, you're just in this bubble. You're in this bubble of a circular feedback loop of like everything you're supposed to do and everything that you're supposed to be and say and think, and you're just brainwashed over and over and over again. So unlearning is literally the hardest thing for you to do. And then there's the scientific aspect of unlearning. And in our recommended reading, we have Buddha's Brain by Rick Hansen. I love this book so much. But in this book, he talks about a lot of things in this book, but specifically I want to highlight that he talks about the neural pathways in our brain. They fire together to solidify thoughts, ideas, images, perceptions of ourselves in the world. And the more times those neurons fire together, the stronger that idea becomes, the stronger that image becomes, the stronger that perception of the world and ourselves becomes. And so when you go on this journey, you literally are teaching your brain to think differently. You're starting to invite deductive reasoning in, you're starting to creatively think and critically think. It sounds silly because like we're all kind of growing up and learning how to do these things, but if you're in these really enmeshed religious experiences, you start to turn off that part of you that knows how to think for itself, because your life, your decision, everything is already decided for you. You don't have a say about it. So, I said in week 1 that organized religion is built on brainwashing, repetitive instruction, repetitive rituals, and texts that continue to build those neural pathways that train your brain to believe what you're being told. And it basically impedes your ability to break away. So even if you're in this in-between stage where you're like, I want to get out and I don't know if I believe, or like, this doesn't feel right to me and I don't want to disappoint my parents, it's that those thoughts coming back over and over to basically reinforce to you that you've heard your whole life. Like, you can't leave because you're going to be shunned. You can't leave because God will never forgive you. You can't leave because it's a sin. You can't leave because you're part of the chosen people who are supposed to only go to heaven and no one else is. There's a myriad, depending on the religion, of what you have been brainwashed to believe so that you don't leave. And it just layers and layers and layers and layers onto itself. And so it is not easy to rewire your brain, and especially if you're getting older. It's hard for us our brains are not as pliable as they used to be, and it's hard work. So one thing I did want to say is that, that with the unlearning, like, I just really want to honor you in this moment and to have you just take a second to recognize within yourself that you've been seeking the answers and the ability to want to unlearn. And that's huge. And that you've decided that you needed to change your life, you want to change your mind, and you want to live more aligned and authentic. And that's huge. So I just want to take a quick second to recognize you and to honor you and really, really think about how much you're doing in this moment, and I'm here with you, and I hope that this is helping you. The thing that I had to also learn too is that I mentioned last week in the doubt and questioning a lot of the male and female dynamics, and so in relationship with males and females, there was that masculine feminine subservience and domination that happens and goes back and forth in religious experiences. And so not being able to ask for what you want, especially if you were a woman, your experience as a man might be something different, right? You might want to be relinquishing your control. You might want to be relinquishing your dominance. You might want to tap into your feminine a little bit more. From the female aspect, it really took a lot of work for me to think about, like, what do I want and what do I need? What do I desire? What's right for me? Because I was like a lot of people in religious experience, kind of put through a carbon copy or like a Xerox copy. Uh-oh, I just dated myself with carbon copies. a copy machine of like, this is what you are. This is what everyone's all the same. All the girls are the same. You just go through this little copy machine. So in your reflections, think about like, what have you always wanted to do? Is there anything you wanted to be? What do you desire deep in your heart? What makes you truly, truly happy? What is right for you? What do you feel in the depths of your being right now that are good for you? Like what do you feel that just is itching to come out of you? Write those things down and use those as a guiding post for you to start doing those things so that you are also affirming your wholeness, affirming the trust with yourself, affirming your own self-empowerment. That's really important to do on this journey. And then read everything you can get your hands on. Watch documentaries. The internet, I cannot tell you, and books have just, we have so much immense information out there that there's no reason why anyone, could say like, oh, I couldn't find something anymore. That's just not a possibility anymore. But reading and watching documentaries allows us, that internal discourse that we can have with ourselves, like, and reading things and saying, does this feel right to me? Does this match what my core values are becoming? Does this feel right to me? And matching it up over and over again is so important. And in doing that, you begin to liberate yourself, right? Because you begin to like dump those old neural pathways, create new neural pathways that allow you to start from an empowered creative space so that you can continue on your path with a great deal of perseverance and confidence and self-security. And then I say this all the time on the podcast, but curiosity, be curious, ask questions. I said it, I think last week and the week before last. Curiosity should become your best friend, should become your daily practice, should become your meditation and your prayer. Not because I'm telling you what to do, but because when you are able to have curiosity as a daily practice, it gives you the opportunity to examine things, to invite that critical thinking in, to think creatively, to say no to things. Say no to things. A lot of the things that I ended up learning culturally in my religion was that I had to say yes to everything. So curiosity as your practice. I forgot to mention something back there about the dichotomy of feeling like a bad person. There was this example I had in my life when I first got out of my religion and I was still figuring out things. I got in a fight with my boyfriend at the time. We were probably dating like 6 months or something. And he did something. I don't remember what he did. I just remember being upset about it. And it was like he had done something that was unthinking and he wasn't like thinking about us as a team. And I don't remember the details of the fight. I just remember this one thing he said to me because it really changed the way I thought about the dichotomy and the good and bad and the black and white, because I was taught to live in black and white and life is such a spectrum. But he said to me, like, I know I messed up, but that doesn't make me a bad person. And I actually never said to him that he was a bad person, but I was thinking it. In that moment, I was thinking he's a bad person because he did this thing. And it stopped me in my tracks in that moment. And I thought, okay, this is the first time I'm having a break between this idea that like everybody is labeled this one thing all the time. And also that maybe if I've made mistakes, I'm not a bad person. So that really helped me examine and remove judgment. Judgment is a huge thing. We'll talk about that later, but in religion, judgment is a core value, and it keeps you separated from yourself, and it keeps this otherness about people, and it keeps us separated from each other, which is not good. So I just want to give you that example. I don't know if you might have some things like that, but that was a real eye-opening moment for me for some reason. I thought, oh gosh, I love this person so much. I don't think he's a bad person, but I'm thinking he's a bad person because he did this one thing. But if I look at him in the entirety of our relationship, he's not a bad person at all. So it's just interesting. Um, and so a couple more reflections here for us to go is finding inner happiness, like I said, through uncertainty. Um, I feel like happiness and acceptance go hand in hand because and happiness is a fleeting emotion, but acceptance and tolerance are a way of life and being that can lead to long-term happiness. And joy and uncertainty are kind of like best buds. Like we can try to control everything we want to in our life, and then we'll basically sacrifice our joy if that's what we do. And a lot of times in religion, that's what happens is you're sacrificing your own joy by living such strict way of life, and so it's important for that. When we get later into the series, we'll talk more deeply about tolerance and acceptance because that's part of the unlearning and unraveling that we have to do. And when we talk about finding your truth, like those were my truths that I found on the opposite end of coming out of this place. And listening to your inner voice, this is really critical. So I want you to start practicing listening to your inner voice. We all have it. It's our internal guidance system, and I want you to do that. So, okay, building internal strength and confidence. Like, how do you listen to your internal guidance system? Well, some people call it intuition. I like to call it my internal guidance system. It never leads me astray. It always lets me know when I always know what's right and wrong. And that's one thing that I've had to practice over and over again. Because I was told things were right and wrong, and I was doing them out of like the perception of what was right and wrong, but I was never questioning whether they were right or wrong. But we internally, I think we're inherently born as moral individuals, and we really know the difference between what's right and wrong. We don't have to fear whether God is watching us or anything like that. I feel very self-regulated and self-accountable in my life, in a way that I never felt when I was in my religious experience. So listening to that internal intuition, that ping in your gut, the little hairs that stand up in the back of your neck, that's your internal guidance system. And when you do that, you create confidence. You start to trust yourself, because when you start to listen to it, it starts to create this beautiful feedback loop for you, and it begins to become stronger. Another thing about creating the internal strength is like affirming your decisions and your thoughts and your actions. And I know people feel kind of silly with affirmations, but I'm telling you, if you have a moment, just think about like your favorite song that has like really empowering lyrics, and how when you sing it, like your body changes and your stature changes and you just feel it to the core of your being. That's all an affirmation is. And I'll tell you my one that I'm really digging this this week, and I'll sometimes just turn it on, or not this week, but like the last couple months, I'll turn it on and I'll just blast it, and I'll just feel into my cellular level that this feeling of empowerment. But it's by Dojo Cat. It's Boss Bitch from the Birds of Prey, and it she just the chorus is like, I'm a boss, I'm a bitch, I'm a boss, I'm a bitch. But it's like so empowering, and I listen to it and I'm like, yes, I am this, that. I feel it to my bones. But if you're not wanting to listen to Dojo Cat, some affirming decisions or some affirming thoughts and positive things that you can say to yourself is, I'm making the best decisions for myself at this time. It is safe for me to explore. I am strong and supported. telling yourself and reminding yourself of your own inner strength is like so important. It's so important. Practice looking into the mirror and saying these things to yourself. Um, creating the inner strength and self-confidence is like, I want to talk about like always having your back. So you're your best friend. I say this all the time. I say it on the podcast. I say it in my Alchemy of Kindness book. Like, we come into this world alone and we leave this world alone. And it's not a morbid thought. It's to point you in the direction that, like, if you could have a decent relationship with anyone in this world, it first and foremost has to be with yourself, 150%. Okay. So in this process, when things are uncertain and there's ambiguity and your family's mad at you, or you don't know if you're going to land on your feet, and there's so many things coming up and you're changing and you're questioning things, I want you to remember to not abandon yourself in this moment. Do not abandon yourself. Oftentimes in the process in leaving, because we've lived such strict lives built with rules and regulations, we can find ourselves in situations where we want to abandon ourselves and abandon all reasoning. So we drink too much, or we eat too much, or we don't eat enough, or we indulge in drugs, or we use our body in a variety of ways to overcompensate from having to abstain in our lives. And those are ways that we abandon ourselves over and over again. And there's a myriad of other examples. And it's important for us to not do that on this pathway, because we can be feeling a lot of sadness and guilt and pressure. And there's just so many things that can come up for you when you're trying to leave. And so I encourage you to start practicing returning to yourself, like forgiving yourself and giving yourself tons of compassion, because the messaging that we heard growing up during these times of change and discovery, the old messaging comes back and it starts to tell us that we're bad, that we're a failure, that we're sinful. But I promise you that you are not. You are beautiful and whole and loved and supported and valued and valuable to this world as you are, with nothing else. Like, if all you do is show up, that's fucking enough. So please, please, please don't abandon yourself in the process of trying to find yourself out of religion. This is really, really important. And a lot of my podcast guests have talked about this. And don't beat yourself up if you do it. Give yourself self-compassion and self-forgiveness to make mistakes and to work things out. And look at yourself in the mirror lovingly. Send yourself beautiful, exuberant love as much as you can. You'll need it during this time. So you might as well get into the practice of it. Okay, guys, you got to do that. Okay, so let's talk about sustainable practices. Okay, so organized religion, the reason I'm even bringing this up, and again, you'll see where you shake out, you'll find out where you feel in all of these things, but like in organized religion, they've done such a good job of institutionalizing practices and habits and prayers and holy days and holidays and rituals and the like. And so when you leave, you can feel saddened from the lack of structure and the lack of organization. Or you could be thrilled that you don't have to do anything ever again. Or you could be somewhere in the middle, right? Because life is a spectrum. Creating practices is a spectrum. And what you believe is a spectrum. So there's a lot of gray to be living in there. And organized religion is built on absolutes, like I've already mentioned a couple of times, like black and white. But life is gray, and no person is one thing. So what I learned on my journey was to create tiny little practices that kept me healthy and fulfilled, and really kept my mental health in a good place. And then as humans, we inherently need structure, but we don't really require outside regulated structure. We're taught that we are supposed to. You often see those examples of like them doing the things with like the kids not eating the M&Ms or whatever. But like if you're an older kid or whatever, like you could have the self-control. It's hard with little kids, you know, like when the dad leaves a room and they tell them not to eat it, right? We're indoctrinated at a very young age that like we can't self-regulate and we need these institutions to keep us accountable. But the truth is we don't. Like we really don't. If you're a good person to the core and you know the right thing to do and you live in the world where you treat humanity from a respectful place, like you're gonna be just fine. So part of walking away requires us to trust ourselves, like trust ourselves really deeply for the first time, and trust our decisions, our actions. And the chances are that you haven't had the luxury of trusting your thoughts or your actions and your decisions. So I've done a little list here of things that are suggestions, but I want you to write out some practices that you can start to do that allow you to trust yourself more. So journaling, again, I'm always a proponent of this because it does a lot of things. It helps us track our own development and growth. It gives us context and clarity when we've overcome stuff, and it gives us the ability to look back and recognize the amount of growth that we've had. It helps us, if we keep learning the same mistake over and over again, we can journal about it and see what were the other steps that I missed there. So I used to write all the time, but I've given up on that. So I do audio journaling, but you can also do video journaling. There's free apps to journal. So please, please, please track your progress so that you can be proud of how far you've come, and also invite kindness and compassion in when you're going back and looking at all the work that you've done. Also speak to a mentor or a friend or therapist regularly to process this, because you're going to be processing so much, and it's not easy to process everything. And a lot of times you're processing emotions, you're processing trauma, you're processing new ideas, you're processing new living areas, you're processing a new way of being, and that is really heavy. So it's important to talk to somebody about it, to have some place to lay the burdens that you're feeling, and the whatever it is that you're going through. Another thing is physical movement. I mentioned when on week 1 I started out, or week 2 actually, I think I mentioned that I started out at a yogic ashram, and there's this Kundalini system that talks about the energy points in our body. I'll let you look that up yourself, but our physical movement is really critical, especially when we're on this path. We got to keep moving our body so that our mind stays safe. And our emotions, our body remembers our reactions and our trauma and our movement. And so we've got to be able to find a way to release that energy and that trauma in a way that's healthy as well. So I definitely highly encourage you to have physical movement as a daily practice. And meditation, again, this can be daunting to some people because some people are purists about meditation and some people are not. Excuse me, I'm not a purist about meditation because I do believe, like a lot of great teachers believe, that life itself is a meditation, and staying present in every single moment, like I'm here with you right now, being present and available to you, and I'm not thinking about anything else, and I'm not worrying about anything else. I'm just here with you. And this course is a meditation of reflection and contemplative practices from me to you and from you to me, right? So meditation can be anything. It can be silence, it can be walking in the woods, it could be words that you're saying to yourself over again, like I am whole, I am good, I am safe, I am secure, I believe in myself, I am kind, I am compassionate, I am tolerant, I am accepting, I love all humanity, I love my brothers and sisters of the world. All these things you can just say to yourself over and over again. I am worthy. I am worthy of a life of fullness and wholeness. I am worthy of love and affection. I am worthy of partnership. I am worthy of abundance. words, meditations over and over. And prayers, I just want to say that, like, for the longest time, I felt weird even saying the word prayer. But I think prayer is just a discussion with divinity and the intelligence that created us. And I'm happy not knowing what that is. But when I'm feeling really bummed out about life, or I'm confused, or I want to make a decision, or even just sometimes I'm just talking to the universe, prayers, religion doesn't have a trademark on prayer. So if you still feel comfortable praying, there is absolutely nothing wrong in doing that. If you leave your organized religion, you can do it. You can pray. You can pray to your ancestors. You can pray to the people who have passed before you, people that you love that have energetic connection to you. So I encourage that as well, okay? And then a sustainable practice is not denying what you feel. Acknowledging what you feel is so important as a daily practice, and as just, part and parcel of being a healthy adult. Like, psychologically, a lot of us are taught that we can't share our feelings, and especially if you're in the older generations. Like I said, I'm almost 40, and I grew up in Texas in a Hispanic family, and it was very much this idea of like, suck it up, don't complain and don't talk about your problems, and you just deal with it. And first of all, I have a lot of feelings, so that was like never gonna fly with me. I suppressed my feelings for a really long time, and now I just allow the feelings that I'm feeling, no matter how hard or joyous or difficult they are. I let them rise, and I am with them, and then I watch them depart. And it's like, our emotions are like the waves of the ocean. They come in and they crash, and they're so loud, but they're also so beautiful and powerful, and they crush the shore, and then they quietly slip back. So if you can get into the practice of not avoiding your feelings, that's always a really great place to be. And work with a therapist or your friends, like, naming your emotions, naming your feelings, naming where you find your feelings. I point a lot to my neck, and my chest. We're still in the midst of this pandemic and the racial injustices that are happening and have been happening for 400 years, or actually more, in this country. And one of the things that was happening to me this past week was, I literally felt like the weight of the world on my shoulders. I felt such deep sadness for my African American brothers and sisters who have had to endure this injustice for so long. And I kept feeling it in my shoulders back here, like the physical pain. And I had to like lay down and just sit with it and cry, because you feel powerless in those moments. But when you're processing everything about leaving your religion of origin, it can feel heavy and it can be sad. It was sad for me a lot of times, just thinking about it now. It was really sad when I had felt like I had lost my mom and my dad because they didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I had lost my friends who didn't understand me. And obviously it's still very raw, even after all this time and all the work that I've done. But I honor that pain that I'm feeling in this moment and let it be there, and let me know that it's going to be okay. And it's just a way for my body to let me know that what I'm feeling is real. And don't ever push those things away, because it's so healing when we allow ourselves to feel. So thinking about all of our Black brothers and sisters very much right now too. I love them so much, and I'm hoping that we are coming to a different place where we can set them on a place of reparation and rebuilding, and in their beautiful light. And I hope that we get there as a culture here in the United States. All right, so I've got a big list of recommended reading, and I also have a movie that I think you guys should watch, okay? So Elizabeth Gilbert, who is like the greatest woman that ever lived, well, her and Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle, I love them so much. But Eat, Pray, Love is one of those books that has kind of everything, like um, coming home to yourself, discovering what your truth is, finding partnership. And although Elizabeth Gilbert's life has changed many times over, her experience and her recounting of that time of her life is so relevant still today. So I highly recommend reading that book, or at least watching the movie if you want to skip the book. But or the book is so good, so don't if you can. And then I mentioned Buddha's Brain by Rick Hansen. Annika Spencer, who I freaking love, she's been on the podcast 3 times. She wrote this beautiful workbook. Like, if you want to work through stuff and build your intuition, get her book. It's so good. It's called Talking the Truth, an Intuition Book, and it's big and it's blue and it's beautiful and it's got lots of space for you to write your ideas and things to reflect on and create a contemplative practice on building your intuition and building that internal trust over and over and over again so you stand firmly on your 2 feet on the ground and nothing shakes you. So get that book. And then I've had Mike Dooley on the podcast and Andy Dooley as well, but Mike Dooley is a prolific writer, and I probably should have just listed out all of his books, but he has some really great books about, embracing uncertainty and also dealing with change, and then finding new language for what you believe. I like the universe, but I also know that even maybe that might be too small to describe what created us. So his books, Manifesting Change, Playing the Matrix, help you change those neural pathways and create a new and beautiful life for yourself. And A Beginner's Guide to the Universe is a beautiful book as well. And then I love The Alchemist. I love alchemy. I love alchemy. The idea that our life experiences can transmute into something beautiful, into healing, into art, into triumph. Like, The Alchemist is one of those like personal stories of somebody who is finding their personal truth. And it's a fiction book, but it's so good. It's a must read. And then Men, Women, and Worthiness by Brene Brown is a really good book. And I know for me, there were some things that I really struggled with my worthiness when I left the Catholic Church, because my worthiness was tied specifically to the church and to my marriage and things like that. And that can be really difficult to unravel the unworthiness and unravel how I feel about myself if I'm not in the church and I don't have a husband. And am I still lovable? Like, those are real questions that might come up for you. So please pick up that book. And then the movie Unorthodox on Netflix is so good. It's about this girl who leaves her organized religion and finds her life, and she finds herself and she comes home to herself. And it's this artistic, beautiful story. There's the book too. You can read that book if you'd like to as well, but it's so good. These are my recommended podcast episodes for you to check out. If you want to look at these podcast episodes in relationship to this subject matter, this one that I have here, episode 71 with Billy Lee Myers Jr., Sonia, and myself. It's a really good episode. It's a long episode, and we talk about our own experiences, and we give lots of great advice and tips and tools for, like, creating new practices, leaving your religion of origin, and all of these beautiful things. And Elena Solano also talks about her experience. These are just all beautiful episodes to tap into. And as always, I'm going to leave these mental health resources for you to touch base with if you need them. And then remind you to email me your questions or thoughts that you have. And I did want to say, remember, while you walk on this path, to trust yourself, trust yourself, trust yourself as much as you can. Don't give up. Um, Remain your best friend. Seek support. There's so many support groups online now. And thank you for doing week 3 with me. We did it, guys. And I'm so happy to be here with you. And I'm so happy wherever you are listening or consuming this episode. And again, don't hesitate to slide into my DMs. Don't hesitate to email me. I love hearing from you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. Mwah.